Labour.
And after they lost Hartlepool back in May, this was a test of Sir Keir Starmer's leadership. So has he passed it? That's the question.
Well, let's cross over to our political correspondent to answer some of these big questions. Tom Harwood is at that count in Huddersfield. Very good morning to you, Tom. First of all, let's start with, this is a very, very significant result. It was going to be either way, but clearly a very, very good result in the end for Keir Starmer's Labour Party.
Absolutely. Keir Starmer will be breathing a sigh of relief this morning. Not because it was a particularly impressive margin of victory. It wasn't. It was barely over 300 votes. All you would have needed is around 160 Labour voters to switch to the Conservatives, and it would have gone the other way. But given the expectations of this by-election, this is a significant victory for the Labour Party. No longer are we going to hear these snipes from the shadow cabinet about replacing Keir Starmer, as he has defied what became the odds in terms of the Conservative Party taking this seat that the Labour Party won only in 2019.
Tom, just in terms of, as you say, the results, was very, very close. Where does this then leave Keir Starmer? Because there was an expectation today, possibly, this had gone the other way, that he might be facing a challenge. That looks very, very unlikely now. Well, I mean, it's not going to happen, is it, frankly?
Frankly, no. We're seeing an emboldened Keir Starmer today, someone who will be ringing this for a victory. The Conservatives are very keen to stress that this isn't a win, this is a hold for the Labour Party. This is sort of the same position as they were in that dreadful loss of 2019, and indeed losing a majority of around 4,000, going down to a majority of just 300 or so. So from the pure maths of it, this is a bit of backsliding from the Labour Party, but from the politics of this is an enormous win for Keir Starmer, given what the expectations were. Standing here up on the balcony in front of the Count just a couple of hours ago, it was very odd to see Labour Party figures sort of being surprised at how well they were doing. They almost couldn't believe it. It seemed that Kim Leadbeater herself hadn't really pre-written a speech at the Count here today. Everything had been written off, and yet, against all of the odds as they became, the Labour Party came through triumphant.
And Tom, do we think that Matt Hancock's exit had a part to play?
Now, if you talk to Conservative canvassers, they would say that it only came up for a couple of days. It didn't really come up in the last few days of this by-election. But when you're looking at a margin of just over 300 votes, that's only just over 150 individuals who would have to change their vote to change that election. It's tempting to think that had this scandal not beset the government just last weekend, potentially this seat could have gone the other way today. There are a number of different factors, of course, in play here. The Labour Party seemed to do better than expected in Conservative areas. And one of the reasons for this seems to be the personal brand of Kim Leadbeater. She pitched herself as the local candidate, the only candidate standing in this by-election who grew up in Batley and Spen, someone who was known to the community and, of course, has a personal story to tell, a very tragic personal story, of course, being the sister of Joe Cox. All of this was playing into this by-election that became so nasty as it went on. I spoke to Labour canvassers yesterday who were followed around by cars with loudspeakers on saying, don't listen to Labour, you can't trust Labour. There were reports of people being egged, being kicked, being harassed. This has become an ugly by-election, and potentially it was some kickback to that ugliness that really carried Kim Leadbeater home.
And Tom, we're just looking at the full result there of this by-election, and we can see that George Galloway got just over 8,000 votes, which is not a bad result for him. He's clearly not a happy chap this morning, though, because he was pretty explicit, wasn't he, in saying that he was only in this race, in many ways, to try and beat Labour so that Keir Starmer would face a challenge. But many seen his part in this election as being really divisive.
Absolutely. This is something that Kim Leadbeater mentioned in her victory speech, that there have been divisions wrought over the last few weeks in this constituency, and actually many outsiders coming in to turn what was a happier community into a more divided one. That being said, 8,000 votes is an impressive total for an insurgent. However, George Galloway seemed to be confident about beating Labour into third place, and instead it was he who came third place and Labour who came first. I caught up with George Galloway just around 20 minutes ago outside the count as he stormed out. He actually told a group of gathered journalists outside this building that he will be looking at ways to challenge the result of this by-election in the courts. He feels that he has been done over here. He feels that the Labour Party lied about his campaign. And also, because that result was so close, within 1% between the winning party and the party that came second, George Galloway says that should have been grounds for a recount. And we know that his campaign was pressing for a full recount, and that recount did not happen. So George Galloway is not a happy man this morning, and no doubt we will be hearing in the coming days his legal challenge, although it may not be all that fruitful.
Indeed, sounds right out of the George Galloway playbook in many regards, doesn't it, Tom? I think the big question and the wider question, of course, is Labour have won here, but what's really important in politics is expectation. It was still close. They still saw the majority slashed very significantly. And even though this means the heat is off Keir Starmer for the time being, it is a reminder that these red wall seats are still pretty vulnerable. The Tories, in the end, came pretty close, didn't they?
It's certainly true. The Tories are nipping at the heels of the Labour Party here. This is not a comfortable win for the Labour Party. And as I was saying a second ago, the Labour Party certainly did not expect this result today. When results are as close as this, it's sort of a change in the wind could change the direction of things. But things landed as they did. And this will be remembered as a victory for Keir Starmer and a test of faith in his leadership. Allies of Keir Starmer this morning are saying that this was in effect a referendum on his leadership, and he has won. Now, talking to people locally here, a lot of emphasis has been on how this was a local campaign and Kim was that local candidate. That being said, the Labour Party seem to be wanting to spin this into more of a national narrative, as all by-elections end up being spun into. But Kim Leadbeater, certainly a local candidate who had a big local following.
OK, Tom, and there we see the tweet from Keir Starmer, which I think hopefully we can bring up again, in which he was reacting to the results this morning. Essentially saying that it was a fantastic result for the brilliant and brave Kim Leadbeater. Kim ran a positive campaign of hope in the face of division. She'll be an outstanding Labour MP for Batley and Spen.
Dan, what did you make of the result? I know that we came in earlier and we were talking about it.
Yeah.
24 hours ago, it was quite a different story.
No, indeed. And as I say, politics is all about expectation. In normal politics, you would expect Labour to kind of hold on to this. Because, you know, this is a traditional Labour seat. I think it's been for the last 25, 30 years. And this will be welcome relief, undoubtedly. I mean, this would have been a really, really tricky day for Keir Starmer if they'd not held on to this seat. They have. But as I say, in the grand scheme of things, it is still a reminder these things are very vulnerable to the Conservative Party. So when you take away the sense of expectation or define expectation that Labour might well lose it, it still is a very difficult morning for the Labour Party. They've just managed to hold on by 323 seats in what should be and has traditionally been a safe Labour seat. But thank you to Tom Harwood. They're joining us from that count in Huddersfield. We'll be getting lots from him throughout the day.
And lots more reaction, of course, to the Batley and Spen by-election results to come. But here's what